Did you find it? Your answers? I haven't had a chance to talk about all the truths of unity in quite some time.
Most explorers imagine the unity as the summit, the long climb of a life spent reaching outward, and then, at the very top, a door made of light, waiting patiently for the worthy to arrive. We speak of it the way we speak of graduation or enlightenment, or the quiet reward at the end of a difficult road. But a door is a strange thing to build at the top of a mountain. A door is not a destination. A door is a passage, and a passage always serves the one who built it more than the one who walks through. So, before we ask whether we are worthy of the unity, it may be worth asking something colder, something that has been sitting underneath the whole story all along, unspoken. The artifacts were scattered, the temples were placed, the path was laid, and every path that has ever been laid was laid by someone who wanted something walked toward. So what, exactly, did the ones who built this door want from us when they decided we should find it? Consider how it begins, not with a discovery, but with a calling. The first artifact does not behave like an object. It is unearthed in the dark of a mine on a forgettable moon, and the moment a hand touches it, the world dissolves into light and sound, and something that feels less like information than like recognition. A vision arrives, unbidden and unexplained, and from that instant the person who touched it is changed. Barrett feels it. The one who will come to lead the search feels it. And the feeling is not curiosity. It is closer to gravity, a pull towards something that has decided you should come. We have learned to call these objects relics, as though they were left behind, forgotten, waiting to be excavated like the bones of a dead civilization. But relics lie still. These do not. They reach. What follows that first touch is not exploration so much as a trail being followed. Constellation, that small and stubborn fellowship of explorers, gathers the artifacts one by one, and the more of them that come together, the clearer it becomes that they were never random. They are pieces of a single design, fragments of a device the explorers come to call the armillary, a thing modeled on the old astronomer's instrument for mapping the heavens. And that is precisely what it turns out to be, a map. The artifacts assembled do not merely sit in a room and hum. They orient, they point, they draw a line through the cosmos toward a single hidden place, and the line is so insistent, so legible, that once you have begun reading it, you cannot stop. This is the first thing that should unsettle us. A map is not a gift you stumble upon. A map is a thing made by someone who wants you to arrive at a particular point on it, and who has gone to enormous trouble to ensure you can find your way there from anywhere you might happen to begin. And then there are the temples. Across 100 worlds they wait, half buried in ice or stone or the long quiet of places no one was ever meant to walk. Inside each one, a phenomenon that bends gravity and light into a slow, patient riddle, and at the end of it, a gift. Power. Abilities that no human body should be able to hold, granted to anyone willing to endure the strangeness of the trial. It is tempting to read these as tests, as if the builders wished to measure us, to separate the determined from the idle. But look at what is actually being rewarded. Not virtue, not wisdom, not restraint. The temples reward seeking. They reward the simple act of going further, reaching deeper, refusing to stop. Whatever made these places did not care whether you were good. It cared only that you kept moving toward the center. And a system that rewards motion above all else is not a school. It is a lure, and lures are built by things that are hungry. Stand inside one of those temples, and you can feel the wrongness of it in your body before your mind has language for it. The stone is arranged in slow, concentric rings, and as you move toward the center, gravity loosens its grip until you are drifting through a space that seems to breathe, chasing rings of light that scatter and reform around a low, patient chime. It does not feel like a ruin. It feels like a thing that is awake and aware of you, conducting you gently inward. And when the power finally settles into you, it arrives the way the first vision did, less like a discovery than like a hand placed on your shoulder from behind. There are something close to 24 artifacts to be gathered this way, strung across the settled systems like beads on a thread no one can see, and Constellation keeps the ones it finds in a quiet old building called the Lodge in the green heart of New Atlantis, with a watchful station named the Eye holding orbit above. We think of the explorers as the ones doing the collecting, but every artifact they bring home pulls the design one notch closer to completion, and it is worth asking, in the hush of that old lodge, who is really gathering whom. To understand how deep the hook goes, you have to follow the trail backward, all the way to the wound at the root of everything. Long before Constellation, before the artifacts had names, a single discovery changed the course of the species. On the red dust of Mars, drawn there by a gravitational anomaly no instrument could account for, a scientist named Victor Isa came across one of the artifacts, and when he touched it, the world fell away from him for 12 days. In that lost time, he met a version of himself from another reality entirely, and that other self handed him the equations for the grav drive, the engine that folds distance into nothing and lets a small ship leap between stars. In the same breath, it warned him what the technology would do to the world that had made him. From that gift came everything that followed. Every settled world, every trade route, every war fought across the dark, all of it rests on knowledge passed from one man to himself across the gap between universes. We remember this when we remember it at all, as the moment humanity grew up, the moment we became a people of the stars. But the records left behind in the silent installations on Earth and near its moon tell a quieter and far more terrible story, and almost no one wants to read it. The drive worked too well. Each leap drew on forces older and larger than the men who wielded them, and the more humanity reached for the heavens, the more the ground beneath it weakened. Earth's magnetic field, the invisible shield that had cradled every living thing for billions of years, began to fail. The atmosphere thinned and bled away into the black, and the planet that had made us, the only home our kind had ever known, slowly became a grave. Humanity did not leave Earth out of ambition. Humanity fled. The cradle was poisoned by the very gift that had promised the stars, and by the time anyone understood what was happening, there was no longer a choice to be made. Stay and die in the dark, or scatter outward along the trail of light that had been so conveniently laid. The lure did not simply invite us out into the cosmos, it closed the door behind us. It made the going irreversible. What makes those records so hard to bear is not the catastrophe itself, but the slowness of it, preserved in the recordings left behind in the dark of the abandoned installations. You can hear it in the voices. At first there is only confusion, instruments reporting numbers that cannot be right, a field that should have stood for another billion years thinning by the season. Then the dawning of understanding, and underneath it, the worst thing of all, the careful professional calm of people who have realized They are narrating the end of their own home and have decided to keep the lights on and the data clean anyway for whoever might come after. But the most damning page is not theirs. It belongs to the man who began it all, who confessed in private only in his final years that he had never been surprised at any of it. He had been warned at the very start by his own face across the void. He had always known the price, and he had decided, quietly and alone, that the world was worth spending for the future it would buy. The confession is still there, waiting in the quiet of the place where it all began. Almost no one makes the journey to hear it. This is the first place where the whole story shifts beneath your feet, where what looked like discovery reveals itself as displacement. We told ourselves a story of pioneers, of brave souls choosing the frontier, and beneath that story was an eviction we never agreed to. And once you see it that way, the rest of human history in the settled systems takes on a darker symmetry. We did not become wiser among the stars. We carried everything with us, every old hatred and hunger intact. The United Colonies and the Free Star Collective bled each other across the colony war for territory and pride. The same quarrels that had stained Earth simply transplanted to wider soil. New Atlantis rose, gleaming and proud, the capital of a civilization that calls itself reborn. And yet it is haunted by the green ruin of the world it replaced. Walk its clean avenues, and you're walking through a monument to forgetting. Whatever scattered us did not lift us toward something better. It moved us, like pieces, into a wider arrangement on a board we cannot see the edges of. And the question of who benefits from that arrangement has still not been answered. For a long time, the search for an answer points outward, toward the strangers in the gleaming suits. The Starborn arrive like a rumor made flesh, beings who seem to step out of the fabric of space itself, demanding the artifacts, vanishing when struck, leaving no body behind, only a slow drift of glowing dust. The first instinct is to call them alien, something other, something that came from elsewhere to take what is ours. But the truth, when it finally surfaces, is far more disturbing than any alien could be. The Starborn are not strangers, they are us. They are human beings who reached the unity, passed through it, and were reborn into another reality entirely, carrying everything they had learned across the gulf between worlds. They are not invaders from outside the story. They are the story's graduates, returned. And what they have become after their graduation is the most damning testimony the unity could possibly offer about itself. Watch how they arrive into the story, and the unease deepens. The first of them appears almost casually, encountered in the course of prizing an artifact loose from a collector in the neon-drowned pleasure city, present one moment and simply gone the next, leaving the survivors to wonder whether they had just met something from beyond the species entirely. Then the violence finds constellation directly, when the hunter strikes at the eye and leaves a friend bleeding on the floor of the station that was supposed to be safe. When one of these beings is finally brought close enough to be examined, the instruments at the lodge refuse to cooperate, returning readings that describe something the equipment was never built to measure, a body that is human and is also not, registering on the dials like a word in a language the machine does not speak. They fly ships unlike anything human hands have made, single seats wrapped in living geometry, and when they fall, they do not fall like people. They come apart into a slow drift of light, as though the body had only ever been a costume worn loosely over something that had stopped needing one. Long before you understand what they are, you understand how they behave, and they behave like people who have quietly stopped believing the living are entirely real. Consider the two who shape the path most directly. One calls himself the hunter, and behind his mask he is a version of a man named Aquilus, a keeper of the faith in another life, who reached the unity, crossed it, and crossed it again, growing stronger with every passage until the man he had been was almost entirely worn away. What is left believes in nothing but strength. The strong should take, the weak should fall, and anyone with the power to seize the artifacts has earned the right to do so. It is a philosophy stripped of mercy, and it is what a soul looks like after it has been passed through the same door too many times, shedding a little more of itself with each crossing. The other goes by the emissary, a version of someone the seeker once loved and lost, returned wearing a familiar face turned cold. The emissary believes the opposite of the hunter, that the unity must be guarded, that only the worthy should be permitted to pass, that this judgment of who deserves the stars belongs to them alone. One worships chaos and the other worships control, and it would be easy to think they are opposites. They are not. They are two faces of the same injury. Both have been hollowed by the crossing. Both have mistaken the wound the unity left in them for wisdom. And this is what the Starborn truly reveal. The unity does not elevate, it strips. Every crossing demands a price that is paid in the only currency that ever mattered. To pass through, you must leave behind everything. Every person you loved, every place that knew your name, every small accumulated weight of a life lived in one continuous thread. The companions who walked beside you, the home you built, the world you bled to save, all of it abandoned in an instant, traded for knowledge and power in a universe that has never heard of you. There is a moment deep in another reality when the seeker may come across a grown woman named Cora Coe, who in their own world is still a child reading books about the explorers she dreams of becoming. To see her aged, hardened, a stranger wearing the bones of someone you knew small, is to understand exactly what the door does. It does not preserve, it erases and replaces. The promise of rebirth turns out to be a polite word for the slow deletion of the self, performed again and again until what remains is something like the hunter, something that can no longer remember why any of it was supposed to matter. We are encouraged to see the crossing as a beginning, a new world, a fresh start, the chance to walk every path you never took, but a beginning that requires you to abandon everyone you have ever loved is not a beginning. It is a desertion dressed up as transcendence. And the cruelty of it is how reasonable it feels in the moment, how easy it is to tell yourself that the people you leave behind will go on living, that another version of them waits on the far side. They do, in a sense, but they are not the ones you knew. The ones you knew, you have simply chosen to walk away from forever, and the choice gets easier each time you make it, until choosing to leave is no longer a wound, but a habit. This is what the builders made, a machine that takes the most human thing about us, our love, our attachment, our refusal to let go, and patiently teaches us to let go of all of it. The longer you serve the unity, the less human you have left to bring it. There is another voice in this story, older than Constellation and stranger than the Starborn, and it has been speaking the same warning for centuries, though almost no one recognized it for what it was. Among the people of House Varun, there is a tale of a being called the Great Serpent, encountered by their founder during a leap through the dark, in one of those moments when the drive folds space and the mind slips loose from time. The being claimed to have made the galaxy itself long ago, before retreating into a sleep that lasted ages while it gathered back its strength. And it promised to return. When it woke, it said it would reclaim what it had made, coiling around all of creation and devouring everything that was not faithful to it, sparing only its chosen. The faithful call this the shrouding, and they have spent generations preparing for the day the Maker comes back to consume its own work. We are taught to hear this as the raving of zealots, a death cult built on a hallucination. But hold it beside everything else, and the resemblance becomes difficult to ignore. A being that made the universe, a maker that sleeps in the deep places of time and waits, a return in which creation is folded back into the one who made it, and only a chosen few pass through. Set that against the unity, and against the entity who waits there wearing your own face, who speaks of the ones who scattered the artifacts, and built the temples, and laid the armillary, and who calls them only the creators, beings who dwell in the endless circle of time and who may, someday, choose to be met. Two faiths, two mythologies, born light years and lifetimes apart, and both describe the same shape, a circle, a coil, a devouring that is also a rebirth, a maker who set its creation in motion and now draws it slowly back toward a single point. If you follow that thread, the great serpent and the unity stop looking like rival myths and start looking like two descriptions of one process, glimpsed by different people from different angles in the dark. And then there is the pilgrim, the figure who threads quietly between all of it. The people of House Varun remember a traveler they called the Unbeliever, who brought their founder a message they took for blasphemy, and who returned after being struck down, as though death were only a door he could walk back through. The same wanderer carried a different fragment of what he named the truth to the humanists, who would one day become the enlightened, dividing his knowledge deliberately so that no single people could ever hold the whole of it. By his own surviving writings, he was an ancient Starborn, one who had crossed into world after world, not to grow strong but to understand, planting the same symbols into culture after culture, and watching, almost fondly, what each imagination made of them. And then he stopped. He withdrew to a quiet world, the second planet of the system called Indum, at coordinates hidden in plain sight inside the very words of the story, 4 and 120. And there he laid the crossing down for good, living out his last days in communion with the infinite he had spent so long chasing. Read his story beside everything else, and the inference becomes difficult to resist that this pilgrim, the keeper Aquilus who preaches the search for meaning in New Atlantis, and the hunter who stalks the seeker across the stars are not three people at all, but one traveler glimpsed at three different bends of the same circle, each having chosen a different thing to do with what the unity taught him. There is a deliberateness in that division that should make us pause. A truth broken into pieces and scattered among people who will never sit at the same table is a truth meant to be reassembled only by someone willing to walk between hostile faiths, to listen to the zealots preparing for the devouring, and to the atheist humanists tending the poor in the lower city, and to carry away from each a fragment that means nothing on its own. It is the work of someone who had seen what the whole of it does to those who receive it unready, and who chose to make the road long on purpose. The faithful of the Serpent, for their part, have spent the long years since readying themselves for the shrouding, certain that the Maker will one day wake, coil around all of creation, and consume everything that is not counted among its own. They do not speak of it as an ending, They speak of it as a homecoming, the Maker drawing back into itself everything it once set loose, which raises the possibility that has been waiting underneath this entire story, the one the builders would never say aloud even if they could be found and asked. Suppose the artifacts were never a treasure and never a test. Suppose they were a seed planted in a young species precisely because young species reach. The lure draws us outward. The drive poisons the home so that there is no turning back. The temples reward us for going further, for refusing to stop, for hardening ourselves against every obstacle in the way. And at the end of the trail, the unity waits to take the most determined, the most powerful, the most relentless among us, and to make of them something that crosses between worlds, shedding its humanity a little more with every passage, growing stronger and emptier in equal measure. If that inference holds, then the Starborn are not the lucky few who escaped the story. They are the harvest. They are what the whole long process was for. A civilization is grown like a crop across countless realities at once, and the ripest fruit of it, the ones who climbed highest and let go of the most, are gathered up into the endless circle by the ones who set the circle turning, and the great serpent's promise to return and devour its creation is not metaphor at all. It is a memory of how the harvest ends. This is the place where the word trap begins to feel both exactly right and not quite right enough. A trap in the ordinary sense implies malice, a hidden cruelty waiting to spring. But the more closely you look at the design, the less it resembles a snare, and the more it resembles a current, a tide that does not hate the things it carries, that simply moves them inevitably toward the sea. The builders did not need to deceive us, because they understood something about us more intimate than deceit. They understood that we would walk through any door that promised more, that we would never be able to leave a mystery unsolved or a height unclimbed, that our deepest strength and our deepest vulnerability are the same restless hunger to go further. They did not have to trick us into the unity. They only had to make sure the unity existed, and that a trail led to it, and that we were the kind of creature we have always been. The trap was not a lie. The trap was an accurate understanding of who we are. And so the central question turns over one final time and shows its other face. We began by asking what the builders wanted from us, but the entity at the unity wears the seeker's own face and speaks of creators who live in the endless circle of time, and hints that they might one day be met, as if they were not entirely separate from us at all. Perhaps the most unbearable possibility is also the simplest. Perhaps the builders are not a higher race that farms us from above. Perhaps they are what we become at the end of the circle, the final harvest of countless crossings, beings who have shed so much of themselves that they have looped back to the very beginning and seeded the trail that made them. A snake swallowing its own tail, a maker who is also the made. If that is true, then no one set this trap for us. We set it for ourselves across a span of time too vast to hold in a single mind, and we walk into it again and again because some part of us far down the circle has already decided that this is what we want to be. It would be easy to call that horror, and it is, but sit with it a moment longer in the quiet, the way you might sit with any hard truth until its edges soften and something else moves underneath the dread. If the unity is a current, then no one is being cheated. The ones who cross choose to cross every time, with the door standing open behind them and the way home still clear. The starborn who lose themselves do so by their own hand, one small surrender at a time. And the pilgrim proved that the circle can be stepped out of, that a traveler can reach the threshold, learn everything it has to teach, and still choose to lay the crossing down and remain in a single world instead. The trap only closes on those who cannot stop reaching, which means the only thing standing between a soul and the slow erasure of everything it is the one capacity the temples never reward and the unity can never grant, the willingness to have enough, to look at the open door and the power beyond it, and the endless circle waiting to take you in, and to turn quietly back toward the small, mortal, unrepeatable world that knows your name. So perhaps the builder's real intention was never to capture us at all. Perhaps it was to ask us a question, the same question the pilgrim answered with his silence on that quiet world, the same question the hunter and the emissary failed and went on failing across 100 lives. Not whether we are strong enough to reach the unity. We have always been strong enough. The question is whether we are wise enough not to need it. And that is a question no map can answer for us, no power can settle, no maker can decide on our behalf. It waits at the end of every trail we have ever followed, patient as gravity, wearing our own face. What would you be willing to leave behind, and what, in the end, would still be left of you once you had left it? Stay with that a while. There is more buried out here in the long dark than any single crossing can reveal, and we will keep returning to it together, one quiet signal at a time.